throttle up.
Carry out, we go for the flight.
Thank you, and everybody in the shuttle program, the crew is go for launch.
Roger, nice to be in orbit.
We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
You're watching live coverage of the NASA SpaceX Crew-6 mission as they return to Earth. Dragon Endeavour departed the International Space Station at 4:05 a.m. Pacific time earlier this morning. On board Crew-6 are NASA's Stephen Bowen and Woody Hoburg, United Arab Emirates astronaut Sultan Alneyadi, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrey Fedyaev. Currently, they're on their way to the targeted splashdown site off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. My name is Kate Tice, Senior Quality Systems Engineering Manager here at SpaceX. Joining me today from NASA Communications is Gary Jordan.
Hey, great to be here, Kate. This is an awesome day for splashdown. So upon departing the station, Dragon underwent a sequence of departure burns. The crew had a rest period and has since kicked off preparations for re-entry, including getting in their launch and re-entry suits and successfully performing a leak check. The next phase of the mission is when these things really ramp up. Dragon has a series of steps to complete before returning Crew-6 home.
First, Dragon will maneuver to the correct attitude and jettison its trunk, which is the cylindrical, unpressurized part of the spacecraft. The trunk is currently connected to the aft or the bottom section of the Dragon capsule where the heat shield is located. So, in order to expose the heat shield and get the vehicle ready for atmospheric entry, we'll jettison that trunk.
And from there, the spacecraft will use its forward thrusters to perform a deorbit burn, which will put Dragon on a trajectory to return to Earth. This burn will last 16 minutes once it starts. The deorbit burn uses Draco thrusters on Dragon, primarily the four located on the forward bulkhead, and is executed at the apogee or the highest point of Dragon's current orbit around the Earth. This will alter Dragon's path to ultimately line it up to re-enter Earth's atmosphere.
As you can see from that graphic there on your screen, it should be pretty visible, especially if you are in Florida. So head outside and take a look up. It's an incredible sight, especially for these nighttime splashdowns. But before we go any further, let's take a minute to meet our crew.
That's right. On board, starting with our captain, is Steve Bowen, who hails from Cohasset, Massachusetts, and is married with 3 children. He holds the title of the first U.S. Navy submarine officer to be selected as a mission specialist by NASA. Bowen is also a veteran of 3 previous NASA space flights, including space shuttle flights on STS-126, 132, and 133. During those missions, he and his crew expanded the living quarters on the International Space Station, delivered an integrated cargo carrier, and a Russian mini-research module. With this mission, he now has logged 227 days in space, including 65 hours and 57 minutes in 10 spacewalks. Today, he is the commander of Crew-6.
Sitting next to
Dragon SpaceX, preemptively, we are 11 minutes out from deorbit sequence start and expect to be LOS during class up prep.
We expect to be LOS during class up prep.
All right, those comms from SpaceX Core to Dragon Endeavour, just letting the crew know that we will have a loss of signal while we are performing the claw separation, which we mentioned that earlier is one of the steps for deorbit, but that deorbit burn coming up soon. Now, getting back to the crew on board, sitting next to Stephen is pilot Warren Woody Hoburg. The 37-year-old is from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He studied aeronautics and astronautics from MIT before getting a doctorate in electrical engineering and computer science from University of California, Berkeley. During grad school, Hoburg worked as an EMT with the Yosemite Search and Rescue. Crew-6 has been Hoburg's first flight since NASA selected him to be an astronaut in 2017. He is also a commercial pilot with instrument, single engine, and multi-engine ratings. As pilot for Crew-6, he is responsible for spacecraft systems and performance. Aboard the station, he served as an Expedition 68 and 69 flight engineer and is coming home with 186 days in space and 11 hours, 38 minutes of time outside the hatch on 2 spacewalks.
In the role of mission specialist is astronaut Sultan Alneyadi. He was chosen by the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center of the United Arab Emirates to be a part of Expedition 68 and 69. The father of five spent most of his life in Al Ain and Abu Dhabi, but in 2020 traded that in for astronaut training in Houston at NASA's Johnson Space Center. This has been his first trip to space, so he also now has 186 days in orbit. Additionally, he went on one spacewalk totaling 7 hours and 1 minute.
It was also the first trip to space for the second mission specialist, Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrey Fedyaev. Andrey was selected as a cosmonaut back in 2012. He will monitor the spacecraft during the dynamic re-entry phase of flight. While on board station, he served as a flight engineer for Expeditions 68 and 69 and returns today also with 106 80 days in space. Now, to prepare for upcoming events, the Dragon spacecraft is currently doing a couple of things autonomously. It's isolating the thermal control system fluid loops from the radiator. This system is what will help keep the internal temperature of Dragon very temperate for Stephen, Woody, Sultan, and Andrey during the re-entry phase. Dragon is also initiating separation of the claw mechanism, which will terminate data, power, and fluid connections between the capsule and the trunk.
And that trunk separation, the Dragon has to orient itself such that it positions the trunk so that it doesn't have any risk of recontact with the spacecraft. Of course, we want that to also deorbit in the Earth's atmosphere, limit the orbital debris, so that will, the trunk itself will burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. It allows Dragon and exposes what are the picotiles. This is really the heat shield on Dragon. And so after that trunk separation, Dragon will reorient itself with the heat shields pointed right in the right direction to allow Dragon to go through the entry interface. We'll see a couple of things in rapid succession at that point, really at the time of the deorbit burn. That's that 16-minute burn we were discussing before, and that is a retrograde firing primarily of those forward bulkhead thrusters that slow the spacecraft down significantly, not as quite as significantly as entry, but enough to really make contact with some of the upper limits of the atmosphere and start with the drag and plasma buildup that gets the spacecraft from 17,000 miles an hour to about 350 after it passes through the atmosphere, and that's about a 7-minute period. We'll have a loss of signal at that time. It's a blackout period which we track. The plasma buildup just allows very limited comms to go through, so we'll be really just waiting for the back end of that 7-minute period until we start getting communications and data from the spacecraft.
Yeah, that heat shield will be doing so much work during that reentry phase. The external temperatures of Dragon can reach up to 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's part of the reason why it will be so visible streaking across the Florida sky in a little while.
Getting some views from inside the cabin now. This is fantastic. So we get these views when we pass over some of the ground stations here on Earth that provide the video straight from the Dragon capsule. So on the far left there is Andrey Fedyaev, and in the seat next to him, to his right, is the commander, Steve Bowen. To his right is the pilot, Woody Hoburg. And then on the far side of the capsule from this view that you're seeing is Emirati astronaut Sultan Alneyadi. You can see they're in their launch and re-entry suits, and they have entered that even before our coverage started and performed a successful leak check. So really, they're just waiting for these next series of events, including the claw separation, trunk separation, and the deorbit burn.
Yeah, you can just see. I love this view because you can notice the previous missions that this Dragon supported in the form of the mission patch stickers that are located there just over Andrey Fedyaev's shoulder, kind of like right above Woody's head from this particular view. This particular capsule is the Demo 2 capsule, the Crew-6 capsule, and the Axiom 1 capsule. So this capsule has been through this 3 times before. This is its fourth space flight. And I love that we are able to document those previous missions inside the capsule as a little nod to history.
Yeah, this will be the 4th splashdown of Dragon Endeavour, of course, being the capsule that carried humans for the first time to orbit in a SpaceX Dragon vehicle with Bob and Doug.
We've got about 5 more minutes remaining in this preparation phase for that claw separation command. As you can see, the crew continue to monitor progress using the touchscreen above their head, as well as the tablets that they have strapped to their legs. It seems as though everyone is super calm and really just hanging out.
Really a nod to the Dragon vehicle itself. There's all of these sequences are fully autonomous. Of course, it's the role of the commander and pilot to really monitor the sequence and the dynamic phases of launch and the re-entry phases, which are really some of the most dynamic that the spacecraft will experience throughout the duration of the 6-month expedition. But they also have the help of the mission specialists. Part of their role is to look over the shoulder of the commander and pilot and look at the screens that are right in front of them, those displays providing telemetry to just be an extra set of eyes and check on some of the things, because there's a lot of data coming in, just to relay them to the commander and pilot. Everybody is watching those screens very intently.
For sure. They also go through extensive training, so even though this is the first time that they have performed this splashdown in real time for this particular crew, they have worked with our Dragon trainers here at SpaceX headquarters for months in preparation for launching this mission. And so while this is the first time they're doing it for real, they have practiced this with simulations many times before lifting off.
Sort of towards where their feet are on the far side of this particular view at the center is that side hatch. Last time we saw the side hatch open on Dragon Endeavour was right before Crew-6 launched to the International Space Station. It was some of the closeout teams in the White Room at Pad 39A that got the crew situated for launch, making sure that they were ready to go. And that side hatch has remained closed through the duration of this mission. It will be opened once again once the Dragon capsule and the crew are recovered by the recovery vessel named Megan. Once the recovery teams outfit the Dragon capsule and bring it onto the Dragon nest, it'll be the side hatch that they'll open to get the crew out.
Once again, we're standing by for claw separation. That is the first physical change that the Dragon will undergo in preparation for atmospheric reentry. That claw separation is what allows for the trunk, the cylindrical, unpressurized section of the spacecraft, to separate, and thereby revealing the heat shield, which is located at the bottom of the service section or the pressurized section of the Dragon spacecraft. So collectively, with the trunk and the pressurized section, the service section there, that trunk will separate, reveal the heat shield, and that heat shield is what will be pointing first, if you will, toward planet Earth as the capsule makes its atmospheric reentry.
So again, we're targeting a splashdown off the coast of Florida. The prime landing target for today is off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida, on the Atlantic coast. That splashdown time is 9:17 p.m. Pacific time, 12:17 a.m. September 4th Eastern time, so just a little more than an hour from now. To give you an idea of how much ground they're going to cover, you can see on their map in the center of their screen, they are very close to the orbit of the International Space Station in the Dragon. They're over the Indian Ocean right now, just west off of Singapore, on a southeastern track heading towards the western coast of Australia. So just in the matter of an hour, they'll cover really the distance around the world, halfway. Yeah, when if you look at the track of Dragon and the International Space Station, how it orbits the Earth around a flat map, it kind of looks like a sine wave. So now they're on a southeastern track that will swing really south of Australia and then come up the Pacific. So you can see once we get into the re-entry phases, it will cross over southern Mexico and the Yucatan Peninsula, and perhaps if you're outside at just the right moment, just a couple minutes prior to that landing site, 12:17 a.m. So if you're still up at midnight watching our coverage and you're in central and northern Florida, be sure to head out, see if you can see, depending on the weather there, see if you can see the plasma trail as Crew-6 re-enters the Earth's atmosphere.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the benefits to a nighttime splashdown. You can still see it during the day, but it is certainly much more striking whenever it's, streaking through the night sky. We've actually had a few nighttime splashdowns prior to this one. So Crew-6 will definitely be a nighttime splashdown, but we also had successful splashdowns at nighttime for Crew-5, Crew-3, Crew-2, and
Dragon,
Crew-1.
SpaceX, we're back with you. Deorbit sequence start.
SpaceX Dragon, good to have you back, and we see the same.
So that deorbit sequence starts with what's called claw sep prep, claw separation preparation. So once that claw begins to separate, it's about 45 seconds for that sequence to initiate, and then the trunk separates about 45 seconds after that claw separation. So it's relatively quick. So we're still in claw sep prep.
Once again, the crew will continue to monitor progress of events using the tablets and touchscreens that they have available to them. The touchscreen directly in front of pilot Woody Hoburg and Commander Steve Bowen also allows them to monitor the state of the Dragon flight computer, as well as be able to keep tabs on any thruster burns that occur. Live view there of mission control here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. And for those that might be wondering, that, yes, is a lava lamp in the center of mission control.
Yeah, lots of activity here. Again, as a reminder, we are in the deorbit sequence, which begins with the claw separation. This demates the umbilical to the trunk, which has solar panels and have been collecting some of the energy from the sun and providing it to the batteries on board. Once that trunk is separated, or lie on the batteries inside, and there's plenty of margin of that power to provide power for the crew as they await for the recovery teams. But after trunk, all right, and the pyro's fired for the claw separation. Claw separation is complete. We're now preparing for trunk separation. Again, it's just a matter of seconds before we confirm that the trunk is separated.
Once again, since that claw is now separated, we're able to separate the trunk. That claw is where the umbilicals for power and telemetry were connecting between the Dragon capsule and the trunk.
The pyro's fired for that trunk separation.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trunk jettison.
Copy, nominal trunk jettison.
All right, so yeah, we have a good trunk separation that starts about a 5-minute clock until we begin that deorbit burn. So that means telemetry is looking good. The nitrox system is primed for cabin and suit cooling, and the heat shield is now exposed and ready for atmospheric reentry. The trunk served its purpose by gathering energy from the sun through the solar rays and converting that into battery power. Since we separated the trunk, we can't generate any more new power, but we don't need to since we're coming home, and Dragon has enough battery power stored already.
Up next, we have the final steps that Dragon will perform prior to reentry, the slew or maneuver to deorbit burn attitude and the deorbit burn itself. This is the last time that the forward Dracos, which are the 4 thrusters located on top of the spacecraft under the nose cone, they will ignite. The deorbit burn will place Dragon on a the splashdown zone off the coast of Florida and will last about starts, and it looks like we're just under 3.5 minutes away from that deorbit burn initiation.
We did confirm that slewing has started. So again, Dragon positions itself sort of off to the side to jettison the trunk so it doesn't have risk of recontact with the spacecraft and successfully burns up in the atmosphere. So it slews or reorients itself to make sure that those forward bulkhead Dracos are pointed in the right direction. We want a retrograde firing to really slow us down. So retrograde meaning the Draco thrusters fire in the direction that the Dragon is traveling in. So the nose is sort of pointed forward if you were to think of it as traveling along that axis.
It's almost like the brakes, like when you're driving a car.
Essentially. And this is a long burn. This is a 16-minute burn. So once it starts, we're going to stand by and just make sure and follow along and just make sure that that has a good performance. That really sets them up to and decreases their velocity just enough so it loses some altitude and starts to make contact with the atmosphere. That slowing down, really all that does is just reduce the altitude, so it doesn't really slow it down too much. We're still hanging around 17,000 miles an hour, but it's really the atmosphere that does the bulk of the braking. It's the friction against the atmosphere and that plasma buildup. We go from 17,000 miles an hour to 350 through that process.
In just a matter of minutes.